Somebody said, how do how do you decide how many controls need to needed to conduct some risk assessment? How do you decide how many controls needed to conduct those risk assessments? Oh, okay, okay. How do you determine how many controls? So that's determined right up before you even start. You have to determine what is the scope of the assessment, and that depends on the assessment itself. So there's different kinds of assessments. You've got a complete assessment that is going to hit all the main components of a governance risk of a GSS system. Like if you had GSS means general support system, that means like a bunch of network. This is usually what people think about when they think about doing an assessment, a general support system. But there's other kinds of assessments. That's why I'm telling you about it. So general support system is a bunch of different networks all put together, a bunch of different computers put on one massive network that are broken into subnets or whatever, however they put the network together. It's a whole bunch of systems. It can be a whole bunch of Windows systems with a whole bunch of Mac systems, and they all work together to do one mission. And they're going to do scanning. They're going to do interviews on people to make sure people know the policy. They're going to make sure they're doing backups, and then that scope will determine how many controls you need to use, how many controls that you need to do. And in that scope, like you're doing almost everything. Like you're doing a little piece of everything. So you're hitting most of the controls. Most of the controls that are in the environment, you're going to try to hit them. Now, if you had an environment with 1,000 systems, and you only have 3 days to run the whole scan, and you can't hit all 1,000 systems. So what you'll do in that case is you'll take a sample size, and you'll take 10%, for example. You'll take 100 systems. You say, okay, we're going to only scan a random set of 10% of this environment. Now, we know that you have some Linux systems and some Mac systems and some Windows. So we're going to take a sample set from each one of those, and we're going to scan those. And whatever we determine from those randomly selected sample size will determine what level of security posture that we see. So that's what you do in a very large environment. You'll take a sample size and then you'll scan from there, because you're not going to hit 100% of everything. It's just not realistic in a lot of, especially in a large system. Now, if you had like 4 systems or something, yeah, you could. But it's determined by the scope. To answer your question, it's determined by the scope. That said, that's not the only kind of assessment you do. So there's other types of assessments. There's ones where you might come and just do a physical assessment. That's just like you're not even logging on systems. You're not scanning anything. You're just doing a walk around, looking inside, making sure the doors are locked, making sure that people can't just walk up in the facility without being challenged, making sure people have their badges on when you're walking around. Just windows, what kind of security systems do you have on the window? Do you have any locks on the windows and doors and stuff? Do you have sensors? Do you need them? Do you have lighting in the area? So that's a physical. You might just do a physical assessment. You might do a wireless, where you're walking around checking the different wireless, seeing how far out the boundary of the wireless is, and if people could do a rogue access point to trick your employees to have them log into their wireless network. So that's another assessment. Another one might be just source code, where you get a copy of all their source code, you run it through some type of your own application to determine if they have things like if they've described what's going on in the source code, if there's different. I'm not an app security guy, so I don't even know what to say. It's going to run through all the source code to determine if there's any kind of vulnerabilities in the code. So that's another. And then another one would be pen testing. So it depends on the scope in each case. which is going to determine how many controls that you hit. And it's going to be approved by whoever you're doing the scan with. So before you even start, you'll say, okay, it looks like we're going to have to do this kind of assessment, looking at just your web apps. We're going to hit these 10 systems. We're going to look at all the controls of NIST 800 for these 4 systems. And it's kind of like you're in the security assessment plan. You'll say, it's kind of like, do you agree? Here's what we're going to do. And then, do you agree? Because they can push back and say, no, we don't want you to hit all 4 of these. We want you to hit just these 2 web applications. And we don't want you to use NIST 800 controls. We want you to use the NIST CSF 2.0 framework or whatever. Or we want you to use ISO 27001 or ISO 27002 controls or whatever. So it's determined by the organization and the actual assessment team that's doing it.